Pain.
Ouch! Ouch!
Ow! It hurts. E.T. Ouch! Ouch! Ouch!
The pain.
So yeah, usually when people talk about pain, you know, you can go into one direction or you can go into the homie's perspective direction that we're gonna go into. So without further ado, I'd like to ask you how your week was because we see each other once a week. So how was your past week for you?
It was a good week. It was a very validating, a good week. I have no complaints. Yeah,
okay.
I did some awesome Bible study through the course of the week, and
anything that stands out that you'd like to share with the group?
In regards to the Bible study, or just
as it relates to like a homie's perspective, intrinsic motivation.
It would take me all week. It was some pretty deep stuff.
Okay.
So I don't want to blah 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 and bore anybody, but it was pretty personal and very enlightening for myself. Maybe I'll get around to it in another episode.
Sure. Well, for those that have been following us since we started about a month and a half ago, we are on episode 6. So we're still looking to get approved from the iTunes store because we're going to have that live podcast there as well. That way you'll get a notification. I know people are hitting me on YouTube because they get the notification on YouTube, but now you'll also get a notification on Facebook and on iTunes. So really happy about that. And about my week, I'd like to talk about one of our earlier shows. We were talking about coincidences or God winks. And it doesn't necessarily have to happen to me personally, but I think it does because I believe that everything that happens to you is a mirror that you are actually deciphering. And so I was actually having adult beverages with some work colleagues. And
adult beverages?
Of
Is that what you said?
Of course, yeah, man.
And of course the kiddie beverages? All
yeah,
right.
man. You know what's really funny? Because I was late to this, to bend our elbow because I was stuck in traffic. And I had given myself plenty of time, like an hour, and I was there in like an hour and 40 minutes. And we were like, man, it's just Atlanta traffic. It was just really bad. And now it's the actual day that the bridge collapsed on Highway 85. And
I knew you had something to do with it.
Everybody was affected by that, you know, here in Atlanta, and we will continue to be for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
So it was just really interesting that we were talking about being stuck in traffic and how does that relate to your quality of life in Atlanta. But the God wink comes in because, you know, at some point, if you're with a bunch of guys, they're going to talk about their relationships with their girlfriend, their wife, their spouse, whatever. And so this one gentleman, he was kind of like my twin sister, in the sense that he had gone through a divorce, and in his case, he was still going through it. He had like 2 years ago, so it's still ongoing, if you can imagine that. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But he
got divorced 2 years ago?
No, he's been going through it. He's been separated for 2 years.
Oh,
yeah, man. There's no Band-Aid pulling off for this situation. So anyway, he's pretty tarnished, if you can imagine. And so he's like, sworn off of I'm not dating any women or, you know, anything because they're all going to be like my ex-wife and all this. And what was really interesting is we're in a closed networking group. So we share leads with other people, you know, if it's related to our business or our industry, right? So you can get a lead from anywhere or a referral from anywhere. So there was this real estate agent, a banker. And this banker was on the other side of town like a year ago. And he was at a meeting and someone needed their roof repaired. And this guy's a roofer, right? So long story short, he's been dating this girl for all this time and she's like his soulmate. And he was telling me this story, and I was like, well, you had gone through such a bad situation with your current relationship that will prepare you for this. Like, you would have never been in the receptive mode to even meet that person before. If you guys look back, because this has happened throughout my life, where there's been girls where we've been at the same store, we've been in the same country, we've been in the same restaurant, but for whatever reason, we had never met at that time. And so it's always funny to say, wow, you were there too, I was there. Right, and you're like, wow, there was some connection, but we just didn't pick up on it until we were supposed to. And that was a God wink to him. And it was a God wink to me because I had kind of pointed that out to him. And then he had gone, it's really interesting, I know you've experienced this too, where you point something out to somebody and then they start pouring their heart out to you. And it might not even be the scenario or the actual, the scene or what I hate to compartmentalize, but it may not be the environment. I know a lot of people that they would say they'd walk past the person in the supermarket, and they wouldn't even say hi to them. They're like, wow, that person dissed me. And they're like, I didn't even see you. I see you at work, and that's where I picture you. Like, people picture people, and they compartmentalize, right? And so it's just really interesting to talk about God winks at an adult beverage get-together with a couple of guys that we were just going to, you know, shoot the shit, if you will. Yeah. And so I think that's why I really like our podcast, because we talk about our things that happen day to day, but we use it from a homie's perspective, and we also use it from a spiritual perspective as well. And I think we've been getting good feedback just because our perception is not so much different. It's just so much that we're putting it out there where other people may be thinking about it, but they're not talking about it. And we're kind of making it cool to talk about just beyond the surface of what guys talk about.
Yeah, and what you see, yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. So I thought that was really, really cool. And then we're in an attendance group. I always talk about it. And a week ago, I had done a presentation for 100 home care companies from across the country. It was great, going to get some good business out of it. So the person that threw it, I'm following up with her earlier this week. Hey, how'd it go? What'd you think? What are your impressions about moving forward? And it was her first conference, her first seminar, or putting this on, right? She did a Facebook Live page and got 100 people to come from across the country, right? Wow. And so it's opened up a whole new world for her as far as people have been reaching out to her about speaking at all these different locations around the country. And I was happy for her, but I was extremely happy for her when she said, you know what, Hamza, I put together a vision board at the beginning of the year that said I wanted to start coaching, and this happened. And that happened. And in our meeting, in our attenders meeting, in the past couple of weeks, people have been bringing vision boards or different pictures of things that they would like. Yeah. And that they intend to get. And so I was just like, wow, again, compartmentalizing. I wouldn't think I would have that conversation in the business world, but you're seeing that it's kind of permeating or through all of these different worlds. And I think that's a really good segue, at least in my opinion, that I'll talk about now, because, again, from a homie's perspective, we never really talk about psychic pain or pain body or emotional trauma that people could repress or suppress. And so let's get started about talking about the pain body. Why are we even talking about it, and what's your opinion of the pain body?
The pain body. Well, you know, interestingly enough, as we sit here and we're talking about this, it wasn't really till late, I guess, in my life, so I really understood about pain in the body, specifically emotional pain. Yeah, we have physical pains, ouch, this hurts and whatnot, but I can remember early on when I was first taking like meditation classes and whatnot, and the teacher would refer to pain, and always talking about this pain and that pain. And so finally I went up to a teacher and I asked him, what is all this pain that everyone's talking about? And she started laughing at me, and she said, honey, you don't have a whole lot of pain in your body. You have a lot of amusement. She said, I just don't worry about it. And I was like, oh, okay. So fast forward, I don't know, maybe 6 months after that, I went through a breakup with the girlfriend. Pain.
Okay.
And a lot of pain. Like, I don't want to live anymore.
Oh, wow.
This is, I mean, I wasn't going to commit suicide, but it was just like, man, that's the first time I knew and really understood this is what people are talking about from emotional pain. It was terrible. Mm-hmm. I just, So that was really my first experience that I can recall that lights up the most about emotional pain.
Okay.
And that was, now I know what emotional pain is. And since then, not really so much. That was probably the most I've ever experienced in my life. I was probably about 19.
Okay.
19 years old. So, yeah. Now when I see people emotionally that are in a lot of pain, I can completely understand. I guess until you get there, you don't understand. Oh, you know, you can tell them toughen up or whatever. But no, it can be very painful, and it can be very, you know, everyone handles it differently. Mm-hmm. So, what about you?
Yes, it's extremely personal. So
yeah, extremely personal.
No one, you know, people get really frustrated when people say, well, toughen up or get over it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is on an individual basis. And that's why I'm really happy about talking about this as well, because usually people feel that they're the only one that's going through
they're the
it.
Only one, exactly.
And they don't necessarily feel that they have an outlet to even express it. And so I think that's where the danger is. Especially we're seeing that in 2017, a little bit in 2016, but in the recent years, Facebook even had to step up because of emotional pain, where people are actually, like you said, you didn't feel like doing it, but people are ending their lives live, and people are seeing this. There was a lady last year in Paris. She jumped right in front of a train on Facebook Live, and it was just because she could not deal with the pain. That it was emotional pain. It could have been a number of things, and we'll never know because she never explored it. So without getting too serious right now, before we had gotten on screen, we were talking about pain body from a topical standpoint, and March is usually is my favorite time of year because of March Madness. And so we were talking about North Carolina, who played Villanova last year and lost. So we felt they had some type of emotional pain. And then we were talking about the girls, where UConn, who had won for 111, or they broke the 111 seasons of winning the championship.
No, they won 111 consecutive games.
Right.
Yeah.
And they broke that. And so you were talking about last year. Let's talk a little bit about that last year. The team that beat them, what happened last year?
Well, they played Mississippi State, and I don't remember if it was in the Final Four, what part of March Madness that they played, but UConn beat Mississippi State. At halftime, it was 60-12.
Right.
The final score was, 60-12 halftime. And then the final score was 98-38. So they beat them by 60.
Well, no mercy.
Yeah, no mercy. And as you can imagine, especially if you've played sports and for team sports and whatnot, that hurts. If you're gonna lose, you lose by 3 or 4 or 5, whatever. Okay, but to get beat by 60 points, that's not even competitive.
No.
So they had a year to deal with that, but they came back, and it so happens that they played UConn again this year in the Final Four, and they beat them. It went into overtime, and this one little, they call itty bitty 5'3" point guard made the game-winning shot at the buzzer, and they broke UConn's 111 game win streak. Incredible game. It was a great game.
Awesome. That's why I love March Madness, just because of last-minute shots. There's a lot of emotion. They're not professional yet, so they wear a lot of their emotion on their sleeve.
Exactly.
And even last night when who lost? Gonzaga lost? Or not Gonzaga, Oregon.
Carolina.
When Oregon lost, right, you're seeing these supposedly grown men crying like uncontrollably because they lost. And you're like, you got to be professional, but it's that pain. They're not used to dealing with that type of emotion. And I think it's really good to see that on the main stage because, and this is probably an ageism where I'm going with this, but I'm in the Big Brother, Big Sister program, and it kind of sickens me where everyone gets a trophy, right, just for participating and such. And I know it's important to keep their level of confidence up, but they're giving them a false sense of self, because they're not seeing what happens in the real world. They're not seeing how competitive it is or not, and it's hard for them to adjust.
Yeah.
And so now they're in the workforce where you have 3 different generations. You have millennials, you have Generation X, where we fit in, and then you have baby boomers. And so it's like, well, how could all 3 of these people...
I'm a baby boomer.
Okay, all right. Well, it's interesting because you deal with all different generations.
I didn't even know.
At work.
I just found that out recently.
And you deal with emotions differently. So, and this is all generalization, but baby boomers, they usually keep things inside. They don't usually express it, right? Generation X is more of, this is the first time, let's talk about it. And then millennials, I think, are still trying to figure it out. And so it's just, at March Madness, you see the whole range of emotions. For every second, you can see, and that's why March Madness is so great. You can see such a high because I came from 10 down, 20 down, 30 down. I tied the game, and I maybe won.
Yeah.
Right? And so the team that was leading the whole time, they're like, how could this have happened? Or like last night where South Carolina, they were used to being from behind. They tied it up, and they still lost.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you get to see that emotional pain on the grand stage of that. Now, the other thing that I think is really interesting about pain, because I said it's all individual, is for my work, for like the past 10, 15 years, I've always lived on a plane. And so I'm traveling to all these different places. And what was really cool working with an architecture firm, at least for my niche, I had to deal with a lot of universities. So we're going to all universities across the country. It was great. I could talk trash about like March Madness or college football and all this. And then we would go to dinner, or afterwards we'd have an adult beverage, right, at the local bar. And these people are such fanatics for their team. Let's just say I'm in Kansas, right? And everybody's like, Kansas is the best, it's the greatest. and you ask, well, yeah, what year did you graduate? And they're like, what? Like, they didn't even go to school, but they have such an emotional attachment and then they have the pain. Like, you hear about, like, violence and all this stuff happening, and it's just like, you didn't even play. Your kids don't go to school there. Like, you have no ties, but your emotional bond is so strong. And it's usually, you're affected by that, and you have a lot of emotional pain if your team has lost or continues to lose. So it's just really interesting to look at it from a topical standpoint where people are observing that. You come to work on Monday and people are upset because their team lost the night before, and they're going to take it off on people at work. Yeah. And you're like, well, how does this work? How can you separate the two? Can you have, the beautiful thing I like is that there's a separation between IQ and EQ. So everyone usually talks about their intelligence quotient. I'm smart. I have 112 IQ, whatever, or 160 IQ, who knows. But I think EQ is so much more important, your emotional quotient, because how are you dealing with certain circumstances? Like those same people that I talked about, maybe nothing else is going on. Yeah. And that's what gets them going. That's what gets them up in the morning. So there's a lot of layers beneath the onion of how people are acting, and you don't know. You're sitting in traffic with this person. They may have road rage because of that. You have no idea, but I think there's always a tie to that emotional pain.
Yeah, I agree. You know, emotions, that is the language of the body, and the language of you as a spirit are pictures. Mm-hmm. So the more you understand that, it can kind of help you deal with it, but that's the language that, you know, pretty much universally emotions that everyone is going to identify with. Mm-hmm. When you start getting into a little bit deeper, a little bit more awareness, then you realize that you can make a separation from the emotions of the body. But, you know, that kind of ties back into one of our previous shows when we were talking about meditation and whatnot. But yeah, emotions, powerful thing. People get really invested into, you know, whatever it is. You know, it could be sitting there just watching news all day, and you start getting caught up in it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Powerful stuff. Absolutely. Well, let's go back for a second, because you had mentioned this traumatic experience at 18, 19, and that was a relationship with the opposite sex or whatever, and it was an experience. And so that you learned about the pain body. Now, at the time, it was a new ground for you as far as learning, okay, what is the definition of this? But as you look now, how were you able to deal with the emotional body or pain body over time?
Over time? Well, for that particular situation, how I dealt with it was the next day, this person contacted me, and it was really funny too, because I was like, I just need to talk to her. So she called me, and then we kind of like, square things away. So everything was going to be amicable between us moving forward. And once that happened, I was all good. So, but, you know, I remember that experience. It always stayed with me. And for whatever reason, maybe could be a little detached moving forward in relationships because I don't want to go through that again. I don't know. I really honestly can't say. You know, maybe. But that's kind of how I dealt with it. Was the very next day there was communication between the two of us, and maybe that's what it is, just staying in communication as opposed to, you know, like you said, the millennials or the X, you know, they want to keep things inside, and then the Generation X wants to, hey, let's talk about it. That worked. That worked for me. So moving forward, I guess that stuck with me. You can't keep things in. If it keeps bottled in, it builds up, and it's just, you know, could be a keg that explode at some point in time. So I think there's a lot of truth to people say, hey, you know, you need to talk about stuff, get it out. I guess that's why there's a lot of therapy groups. You know, you have AA and, you know, whatever addiction or whatever it might be. So you could sit there and discuss, get things out, see what other people are going through to make you know that you're not alone in it. You know, and that I know that helps a lot of people. Maybe it's not for everyone, but there are a lot of people that it works for.
Yeah, I think that, you know, being an Xer and you being a baby boomer, I wish that there was a way that it could become cool to kind of reach out and express the emotional quotient, because what you're seeing, and even in the news last week, there was this young girl in high school. She had planned this mass violence, right? And it was thwarted by her parents. But you always hear about this, unfortunately, at schools, and at schools where you would imagine that it wouldn't happen, right? There's a tradition, stereotype that violence happens in the inner city at those schools, and they have metal detectors and all this. Well, how come they're not having all those shootings there, right? And it's just like, well, I don't know if they're talking it out. They're probably not talking it out. There's probably a lot of stopgaps or safeguards so that doesn't happen. But where we have these massive killings on university campuses and on school property, these kids are, you would think on the surface, well-adjusted. And in many cases, they're not. They're really repressing or suppressing a lot of emotional pain. And like you said, it's a powder keg. If you keep pushing it down, your body has a way of getting all this stuff out, whether you like it or not. I know we were talking before about emotional pain or psychic pain, and I love it. For anybody that listens to this, spend $10, or I think it's $6. Go to Amazon and get You Can Heal Your Life, or You Can Heal Your Body by Louise Hay. And it's really great because she shows, okay, you have pain in the back or you have pain in the leg. Okay, here's the spiritual association with that, right? And so if you don't have that education to know about it, it was an eye-opener for me. You know, it's like, wow, if there's pain in the back, there's some confidence issues, or there's this and this and that. And you start delving deep into it, and it could be spot on or not, but it gives you a different perspective that maybe you hadn't thought about, and then you may bring it up and talk about it. Like I was mentioning, I was having beers with these guys, and this came out. It wasn't planned, but the fact that I can point this out to this person that was repeating something. He was on autopilot of what he was dealing with in different relationships. And not that I was his therapist or anything like that, but I just pointed something out. And then it all came out for him. Like, wow, I've been living this pattern. It's been destructive and this and that. And I think it's eye-opening for everybody, you know, if they feel that there's some support.
Yeah. Another interesting thing is, especially as a clairvoyant, and I know you might have, you know, experienced this or noticed this in your experiences, but you could be walking down the street or wherever, and I can tell the degree of people, the pain that they're in based on how in or out of the body they are.
Yes.
So usually the more out of the body they are, the more pain they have. And you can look at the body and you can see the pain. See, as a spirit, it's a simple answer to get out of pain, right? It's the body's in pain. Spirit doesn't experience pain. Right. So if the body's in a tremendous amount of pain and you can't get that out of the body, as a being, your answer is, well, I just get out of the body. And that lessens it, right? So you're either getting out because there's so much pain and you can't handle it, it's not a comfortable place to be, or you're out because you're invaded and you have no room to get back into your body. So it's always interesting over the years being a healer and whatnot. That's one of the first things I do with people that are in a lot of pain is give them some communication about what's going on, the pain in their body, and do they want to make a decision about working on getting that pain out of the body so they can get back into the body, because the body's a nice place to be. It's fun to have. You know, you got to take care of it, you got to treat it right, but when there's no pain, it's a great place to be. But that's generally what I see that keeps most people out of their body is the degree of pain. And you can see when they're walking down the street, you can see they're way out of their body or way above it. And it's just that body has too much pain.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, I get what you're saying because
I know
we've gone down the story. But just for people listening to the podcast or maybe watching on our various social media channels, what do you mean? Like, for your physical third dimension body, you can see I'm wearing a blue shirt. I can see you're wearing a hat. But if you could give greater explanation of you seeing somebody being outside their body.
So what I'm talking about is, you know, physically I could see someone, you know, their physical body and they're wearing whatever, but I also could see and am aware of them as a spiritual being. So
now, are you aware because you're wearing like 3D glasses, like the old Godzilla movies, or what's happening there?
I'm aware more on a clairvoyant from a 6th chakra level, that energy center you have right in the center of your head. So I can see them. You know, there's people walking around on this planet that can see spirit, so to speak.
So you're saying from the 6th chakra, and I won't interrupt you anymore, but are you saying from the pineal gland you're able to access?
Yeah, it's associated. Yeah, that gland's associated with the 6th chakra.
Gotcha.
So I can see them as spirit in relation to their body. So some people are way in their body, some people are a little bit out of it, some people are way out of it. So here's their body, and then there they are as spirit. So the first question, usually the first thing I see is, I'm looking at the body and the energy of the body, and I can see there's a lot of pain, right? And so that tells me a lot. That's why they're so out of the body. If there's not a lot of pain, you're going to be in your body. Like I said, it's a nice place to be. So it's just more from a clairvoyant point of view. And in all the years that I've done readings, whenever I'm doing a reading, doesn't matter how much pain someone's in, you always communicate to them as a spirit, right? No matter where they are. If they're in the body, that's fine. If they're out of the body, they're in the corner of the room, you always communicate. Because I'm not giving the body a reading. I'm giving them, as spirit, the reading, the spiritual reading. So I've been trained to find where they are as spirit in relation to their body. So that's an easy thing for me to see when people are out of the body. I'm just used to it. I've been doing it for like 30 years or whatever.
Now, well, it's interesting you said a spiritual healing, so if you were doing readings, they had necessarily come to you, right? Versus, like, in popular media, like, what comes to mind right now is, like, the ghost whisperer. She sees that they're out of body, and she runs to that person, and they're like, who the hell are you? And they might be taken aback. So you're saying you don't do any of that? You don't just walk up to random strangers and talk to them?
No, not random strangers. If someone comes to me, and then, I give them whatever communication or, whatever questions they're asking, I'll take a look at that energy. But no, I never just walk up to anyone, because that, wherever a person is at is where they're at. And I've learned to know when to help someone and know when to just sit back and allow them to have whatever experience that they're having. So I don't judge it, because that might be a good reason why they're out of their body. Kind of like what we were talking about with, I mentioned last week with Sybil. The woman that had she was a schizophrenic, had like 16 personalities, and her mother was very abusive to her, physically and, verbally. And she learned to get out of her body, bring another being in, just so she could deal with the beatings and all the pain that was associated with that. So I'm not going to, that's just one example. People are at where they're at, and I don't have to go around and I feel I don't have to go around and changing everyone. If someone comes to me and they're looking for some kind of communication or counseling or something, okay, then I'm there for them. But it was just more from an observational thing.
Okay.
I see people.
Now, you mentioned Sybil, and I want to touch on that in a second, but I have another question for you about the process that people may potentially go through, or someone that may be listening to this and thinking about taking that next step. So have you found like there's been a pattern potentially where you may see somebody outside their body and then they ultimately come to see you for some type of spiritual healing, maybe to address their emotional pain, maybe to address that psychic pain in the body? Have you found that, this happened and this happened, ABC, and now I'm coming to see you, or is it more random? Have you found any type of patterns?
I wouldn't say any particular patterns, except just anything that makes being in the body uncomfortable. So any kind of pain, whether it's from a relationship or any experience that where you quote unquote get lit up and you're just dealing with. So it can just vary. Nothing in particular. It can just all into the spectrum.
Okay.
One end into the other.
Because my experience is somewhat different. I found that what you're talking about, which is kind of random, but I also found that going through Horizon Center of Intuitive Awareness, it was a pattern that people actually came through. And the reason why they came through, it was called, I think I heard it from Wayne Dyer, and he probably got it from someone else, but you have that spiritual 4x4 that hits you. And so there's something that's going on in your life, and your guides and your angels are around you.
Yeah.
They're tapping you like, hey, this is what's happening, but we're so used to being in our body, as you mentioned, and may not. We have that veil. We have that veil that does exist. So, especially as you're an adult and you leave the early childhood years, that you're unaware of. So you may be getting tapped along about, hey, this is something you should address. This is something you should address, and then you get hit by that 4x4 where you feel like, hey, I tried everything logically, and it's not working, and I am so far outside of my comfort zone that I need somebody that thinks outside the box. And then I've seen those type of people come through the door, and it's been some variation of that. But I think ultimately it was that spiritual 4x4 where they're ultimately coming in and they really want to make a significant change in their life, primarily dealing with some emotional pain. It could be, you fill in the blank, but it was that spiritual 4x4 that really tapped into them where they decided to seek some type of spiritual healing.
So I guess that can kind of align with, was it our first show was napping. One of the shows we were talking about first hellos.
Yes.
And I guess that could be under that same umbrella.
Yes.
Whereas whatever is kind of going on in your life and you get this, you might not realize it at the time, but you get this spiritual hello, as we like to call it, from whoever or however, and then that leads you in that direction of going and getting some kind of communication or fixing whatever that is that's going on in your life. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think if, to be linear here, I think that if we would use before, the middle, and the end, the before would be before the spiritual awakening, the middle would be the horizon, and then at the end it would be, fill in the blank. And so just talking with Joanne in recent weeks, she's run into people that she hadn't seen in years, and they kind of like, that's that trigger, like, I remember when I first came to see you, and my life was totally upside down, but because I learned these tools and I learned some of the practices that you've taught me and techniques, that I was able to overcome that, and it's made me a better person. And so I'm really appreciative throughout the timeline now, right? And so now you can kind of put the pieces together. They say hindsight's 20/20, but they're like, wow, most people say that they wish that didn't have to happen for you to get your spiritual awakening or your spiritual hello. And in many cases, I think that's that third dimension where you feel like you have free will. Like, I can control this. I'm gonna eat cereal and Starburst today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then there's something like, hey, there's and I'm only saying that today because I just had a spiritual hangover last night, and we were talking about Sybil earlier. And usually, you and I kind of get together either via phone or via text or something talking about subject matter. And last week we were talking about transmediumship and, everything that goes in with that. And so Friday had passed and it was like Saturday afternoon. And you're like, what's up, dude? What's going on? We're going to talk about tomorrow. And at the time I was watching the movie Split. And it's M. Night Shyamalan. I know I butchered his name. I'm sorry. As Hamza, I really appreciate when people can pronounce my name correctly. But
M. Night Shyamalan?
Yes, M. Night Shyamalan.
Sure,
and
something like that.
Yes, and I love his stuff. I'm actually going to go back and watch some of the earlier stuff because they deal with lower chakra, right? They deal with, especially, what was his biggest one, The Sixth Sense. And for people that watched it, it was great. And a lot of people don't like his movies after that because it set such a high expectation that nothing can ever reach that again. But from a spiritual standpoint, you see that there's a lot of red in his movies, which is associated with the lowest chakra, with the first chakra, which is red, which is fear or survival, right? And so there's a lot of spiritual connections in his movies. So in watching Split, this gentleman has 23 different entities that come in and out. Yeah, in and out.
I didn't realize there was that.
And it's great because you're talking about, are you suppressing this energy or what's the repressed emotions that happen? And like Sybil, like you mentioned, his mother was very abusive when he was a child.
Her mother.
And so, no, and his mother in Split was very abusive as a child. And so these other entities had come in to protect him.
Yeah.
Right? Because he didn't have any seniority in his body. And not having that seniority, these other beings can come in. And it's just really amazing how strong the mind is because, you have one that's really strong, you have one that's flamboyant, you have all these variations. But one that was really interesting, they had one that had diabetes. And,
wow.
And so he's recording, he has like 20, on his screen, he has 23, right? 23 different entities, and they're all recording. So the person's watching him, and one's flamboyant, one's a woman, and he's like, you don't think this is real? Then why am I taking this insulin shot? You know what I mean? It's like all in your mind because the mind's so powerful, but that's what I would call a psychic break because he has no control. But on some level, he does have control because he's speaking with the counselor. And the counselor is like, who's speaking now? Who's speaking now? And why are you speaking now? And they're like, we are here to protect him. We're not going to let this happen to him again. And so he kind of relies on that. And there's one that's a child. He's 9 years old. And like, I'm going to get in trouble if I tell you guys this. And what happened is he wound up kidnapping these women. and he's kidnapping these women for who knows what. Everyone's thinking the big fear, and I think that's why everyone watched the movie, because the trailer is very scary, right? You're at the mall, and you're with the parent, you're with the protector, and they still get kidnapped, right? And so it was really interesting. They had three, I'm pretty much giving the movie away now, sorry, but there's 3 girls that get kidnapped, right?
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. So sorry if you might want to cut this off if you plan to watch it. Or I might entice you to watch it even again, because I might show some things that you might not have paid attention to. So you had, you had the cheerleader and her best friend, and then this other girl. This other girl's like a recluse, right? She's new to the school. She's not participating in the reindeer games. She's not Rudolph at all, right? They won't let her play. And then she's kidnapped with them. And so come to find out, she also had a lot of repression. By being locked up with that person, she realized at childhood she had a traumatic incident with her uncle, right? So there was some pedophilia going on with that. And so M. Night he's uncovering all these things that happened where on the surface these people were just walking around. But like you said, they're so far out of their body they don't even recognize it, right? And so that movie uncovers so much about that, and I think that's where when you text me about that, I'm like, we just talked about transmediumship last week, let's talk about pain body this week, because there's a lot of relationships to those. And one other thing that I like to talk about is my spiritual hangover, and I say hangover because people associate that with alcohol. And I do associate that with alcohol. So one of my favorite pastimes was drinking, having a beer or two with my grandfather. So much so, God bless him, he's transitioned, my grandmother transitioned. And while they were still here and they were up in their years, he wasn't even allowed to drink, right? I'm coming from Atlanta down to Florida where they live, and she let him have a beer or two with me. So, that's my main man, it always will be. So he came in last night, and I forget the book that you and I were reading like a couple of months ago, but when I tell you the story, I think it's going to relate. So he's coming to me in my dream last night. That's why I was saying a spiritual hangover, and I was all happy, like, yo, we're going to have a beer, and we're just riding around, and he's like, you have to be very careful. And it made me think of Joanne talking about Scott, too, because being psychic, I think we have an idea of other dimensions. And, Scott and people that transition, even my grandfather last night, is like, you guys don't even know the half of what we go through, I would say day to day, but it doesn't exist. But it's totally different, even though we think we have an idea. And so he kind of cautioned me about pain body because I had an agenda a little bit, because I think, like the movie Matrix, we have these, you take that red pill or blue pill, and you get exposed to some of these things, and now you want to tell other people. And me personally, I would associate a pain body just because I'd like to spread that information, and I want everybody to know it.
Yeah.
But I'm infringing on their free will. And the thing that I say was a hangover is my grandfather's like, the things that are giving you pain bodies, you're going to carry over when you transition.
Yeah.
So you have to be very conscientious of what's happening in your life and your perspective on things, because everybody is a mirror to your perception. So if you're only associated with pain and being downtrodden or victimization, that's going to happen, and that could be your form of hell, right? I'm in hell. And you're like, whoa, this isn't what I... And they're like, well, this is what you were going through on the earthly plane.
Yeah.
So you have to be very conscientious about the spiritual body or psychic pain or pain in the body, because I think it transcends. And I think you go from that spiritual 4x4, I think there's levels to that too. There's no... I wouldn't say, in closing, I wouldn't say that, oh, okay, I went through Horizon and I got these classes and ongoing classes, I'm an intender, that I still don't deal with things, right? So I think even for us, it's more of the universe winking back, like, okay, you know this? Well, let's see how well you know it, right? Let's
That's why you learned all this,
right?
So you can deal with when you're out there in the real world.
Yeah, but they say the universe, I do comedy on the side, and they say the universe is the biggest comedian. I totally believe it for that reason. You're like, but I should know better. And they're like, well, let's see if you know better.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Was M. Night Shyamalan, I'll just say Shyamalan, I can't pronounce
that.
Was he in the movie? Because he has a habit of being in his movies. He'll have like a small role. Kind of like
sure. Stephen King does it. Stan Lee does it. Spike Lee does it. Yeah. Yes, I would say I think he was in there for one moment, and he had a TV show that's going to come out again in the summer, where there was like the end of the world, and they were cocooned for like 200 years or 400 years. Do you remember that last year? And anyway, yeah, I think he did a cameo on that. And as we're talking about popular media, I think everyone should definitely go, if you're interested in the subject matter about the pain body and such. I think Split was really good. Sylvia, or what was the name of it? Sybil, I think you should see that. And I think you should also see Mr. Robot, which is a TV show, because he had pain body. It was a lot of association with a lot of pain as a child, and he started having these split personalities that made Mr. Robot popular. Yeah. And even the guy who's the producer, he even does a cameo in his show, too. So they all kind of, like, wink at you as in, hey, yeah, man, I'm directing this.
Well, it's funny that we're kind of talking about this, and I won't give it all away, and I haven't watched it yet, but there's a movie, I think it went straight to video, but Robert Redford's in it, and it's called Discovery. Okay. And it's about a scientist who discovered he's got overwhelming proof of life after death.
Okay.
He was able to discover it. Mm-hmm. So no one's disputing anymore, but what's going on is you have this rash on the planet of people saying, wow, well, there's life after? I want it now. So they're just going around committing suicide.
Sure. Oh, I got to see that.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's called Discovery.
Okay. Yeah.
So people are just killing themselves like crazy. You know, he's doing an on-camera interview, and one of the producer guys says, you know what, I really believe in everything you're talking about, and just kills himself.
Hey, okay, so that's a really good point, and I think people should leave comments in the YouTube comments about seeing that movie. Maybe we'll do like a movie night and everyone watch it on Skype. We can hold up to like 24 people or something if we all watch it. Yeah. But you know what, that actually is that triggered for me was Abraham, because I personally experienced in my family pain body where someone decided to do that, right? And so I think it's more pronounced now, maybe because of the web, where it's real time and everybody knows this. And again, that was another reason why I wanted to talk about pain body as well, because before that happened, you see somebody in one light, and you're always taken aback, like, how could this happen, spiritual or not? Yeah. You get taken aback. And so listening to Abraham, and Abraham's talking about we all ultimately do that. We get rid of that pain body. Either we're old, or we're middle-aged, or we're a teenager. We decide when we want to leave, right? And so you hear that, like you said in that movie, it's going to be really interesting to watch, even though it's going to be way off base since we don't know what's happening. Even with people that have NDEs, near-death experiences, I'm sure they only get a glimpse of what they experience, but they didn't make that whole transition because they're always taught you're not done yet. You got to go back, right? And so you're like, man. And so you have some of that word is romanticized because it is better. Everyone's happier now. It makes me think of Abraham talking about Robin Williams and countless other people that, you know, they're way happier now than they ever were on Earth. And so that movie is kind of scary in one sense because you don't want, like, the whole drink the Kool-Aid or David Koresh or any of these cults where they do have these mass suicides. But on some level, there may be a contract where they decided to do that.
Yeah. Interesting in regards to NDEs, near-death experiences, it seems... And there was maybe some, but it seems like every case I've ever seen of people talking about, they didn't want to come back. Mm-hmm. They talked about how great it was or just the experience, and they just didn't want to come back and either were told, no, you still have some more time or whatever, you got to go back. But it seems like they all were like, nah, I don't want to go back. This is too great of a place or whatnot. So.
Well, I'm always smiling because I think it was Sylvia Brown that said this, and she was saying, or Abraham, who knows, I mean, I listened to all of it, right? And so they're like, you're only saying that now because of how you're living in the third dimension. And that's the decision you're making based off of where you are right now at this moment in time. Yeah. But that is totally a different perspective before you choose to incarnate. Yeah. Right? Before you choose to incarnate, you're in all this bliss. You're on the 8th, 9th, 10th realm, and you see things differently. And your guides that are around you now, or they still love you, they haven't left you. I think where people have that pain body is because they feel that they're alone. They don't feel that connection with Source, right? And so that's where your disconnection is. Even when Esther first started channeling him, it was very rough. She couldn't really get into that vibration. She had to raise her vibration because Abraham wouldn't lower his vibration, and Abraham wouldn't lower his vibration today, and that's why we have those spiritual 4x4s, because they will not come down to our level. We're just so far disconnected that we have that pain body.
Completely agree.
We have that pain body because we are not connected. So you see people outside of their body. You're like, of course they have that pain body. Of course they want to leave. And that's why Abraham's like, you guys, they make a joke of it because we live forever, right? It just may not be in this body. It's like, you don't have to croak to experience this. You can experience this on the third dimension. Yeah. And so people are like, this doesn't work. Law of attraction doesn't. Law of attraction. None of that stuff works. You're just like, no, there is heaven on earth. There's countless books that people can read, and they're just like, is that true or not? And it's like, no, is it true to you? So when people argue, if you can or you can't, you're right. Somebody argues like this can't work. I'm like, you know what, you're right. Somebody's like, this could totally work. I'm like, you know what, you're right. So I learned, right, to have my own spiritual space and find out, like, who I can share different information with, because you're attracting other energy. You learn how to read energy is what I'm trying to say, right? And then that way you're not just, like, bumping around in the night, just running into different energies that you find yourself in situations that are outside of what you really wanted. It was. I like that too. I mean, I'm kind of talking on both sides of my mouth this time, because I love Minnie Riperton, and one of her songs was Inside My Love. And she's like, we're strangers, not just strangers, just lacking the knowing. And so, Abraham again talks about your best friends are the people that you probably hate in this life. And the reason why is because they're bringing out of you what you came here to incarnate to learn. Right? But on this plane, you hate them. They get under your skin. And they can only get under your skin because they know your buttons. So everybody that's married or been in good relationships, and you may not be with that person now, when you transition, you be like, oh, man, it was you. Yeah, okay. And y'all have an adult beverage. You know what I mean? Because I had an adult beverage with my grandfather last night. It was awesome. I didn't want to wake up. I didn't have an NDE. So that's why I'm like, it's a spiritual hangover, because it felt so good to be with him, and he's like, I'm always there, and you stop being so serious. And I know you and I talk about that from like, from a societal standpoint, because from a homie's perspective, we don't look like the majority of society, and because we're not in the majority of society, you see people treated a different way. Yeah. And so me having access to some of that information, I get upset when other people don't want to hear about it, but people learn on their own space.
Yeah, on their own time frame.
Their own time frame. And so in that aspect, it is a perfect world, right? So people can get upset and say, well, what are you talking about? Well, let me tell you about Trump, and none of that really even matters, right, at the end of the day, if you don't want to be in your pain body.
That would be a good, another subject is time frames.
Okay, how so?
Well, how we were kind of talking off camera, and how sometimes, and it's really more of an awareness thing, where you can see maybe you met some woman, maybe you're kind of interested in, but instead of overly pursuing it, you just let things pan out on their own without any effort and on its own time frame. And sometimes things can happen, or in any situation, without having to put too much effort into it, just letting things kind of play out on its own time frame.
Absolutely. Well, I think that relates to pain body. I mean, we have a little bit more time today, but I think it relates to pain body too, because if you're in a pain body, that's force. Like, you're trying to force something, right? And I think, and I can knock on wood, but there's only like a handful, and I could be wrong. I might not want to read the comments after I say this, but for all of my relationships, there's probably only like 2 or 3 that probably hate my guts. Now, if we were married, it'd probably be a lot more. But the fact that,
That's funny. 2 or 3 days, and hate my guts.
Yeah, but you know what? A lot of women tell me over time, like, wow, you gave me my space. You let me do what I want to do. Like, I didn't try to control. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it was just like, wow, I appreciate it now. Not saying I may consider myself a good mate, right? But I think that, like Abraham says, we're all mates at some level, on some point, right? So somebody I dated 20 years ago, I can see today why I met that person, or why I dated that person, and what I learned from them at that time. And I can meet somebody tonight or tomorrow, and I just have to put on my seatbelt, because I'm like, well, we're just going to wait and see how it's going to go. And, I think it's a fine line, because some people, we are in third dimension, and we do have the free will and all. But I've always found that when I get out of my own way, things work to my highest good, right? So I think
that's one of my favorite sayings: get out of your own way.
Get out of your own way, man. And I think when you get out of your own way, you don't take yourself as seriously. You don't try to force things. I think that's where the pain body comes in. And when you look at those timelines, it starts making sense. Hindsight's 20/20. I'm just trying to get better at real time, because as much as I try to in real time, and I love Eckhart Tolle, and I mean, I wouldn't even be here today in physical form if I wasn't still learning. So I'm not standing here on the top of a mountain in the yoga position, right, in the lotus position, spouting knowledge. I'm just talking from a homie's perspective. but I'm still learning, and I found that whenever I get out of my own way and I let the universe take control, and then I can actually ride, I surrender, and the wave is so much better. Like, I love to surf, so anybody that watches this and they want to surf anywhere in the world, I'm down. Like, the only place I haven't gone that I still want to surf right now is South Africa, because I heard that surfing there, it's like the most beautiful place because the oceans connect in South Africa, and so to surf there is going to be phenomenal. So, you
have to just go during the off shark season. Don't they have a lot of sharks down there?
You know what? But to be honest, I'll share that moment with you.
Oh, my God.
And I didn't have any pain with it. But in Hawaii, we went on a shark expedition. So, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. They throw a ton of chum in the water. So we have schools of sharks, and I have video of it. And we jump in the cage, and the sharks are bumping up against the cage. And it was really funny. At the time, I loved it because I was in the moment. But then watching it later, you're like, wow, what the hell are you thinking? And then I let some other people influence me, like, dude, you're crazy or whatever. And it was just like, no, in that moment, I was okay with it. And I'm still here to tell the story where other people would say, hey, I would never do that, or I would never jump out of a perfectly working plane, or any of that. I totally...
When you first told me that story, I didn't realize you were in a cage. I thought you were just freely getting in the...
Oh, hell no. No, I wouldn't be here.
Man, you are an adrenaline.
Yeah, no, I totally wouldn't be here.
I think I could do a cage thing, but...
It was a quote-unquote controlled environment, but for people that know, especially in 2017, you can do a YouTube search. There's a lot of those controlled environments where the shark gets in the cage.
It goes wrong. Well, don't they have like a little opening?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I always
see that. I'm like, well, why didn't they just put bars there? Why do they have those open?
I don't know, dude. All I know is I'm here to tell the story. I've done it. It was great. It was phenomenal. And I wasn't in any pain or any pain body associated with fear of going in it. And it was great.
So how do you now, today, in present time, deal with when you have a degree of pain in your body? How do you deal with it?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I have to go back to the first podcast that we ever did, and that is take a nap.
Take a nap.
Yeah, because if I don't sleep on it, there's countless incidences where there's a lot going on. And fortunately, unfortunately, we are so connected both electronically and spiritually, right?
Yeah.
And so I try to utilize the whole 24 hours in a day. People that know me know, right? Like, I'm always in front of the computer, or I'm on social media, on Instagram or YouTube or whatever, right? And so there's so much coming at me, but there may be something that I just can't figure out, either in some of the groups that I'm in on Skype or different forums, and I have to sleep on it, right? And when I sleep on it, I always get an answer. Like, I can rely on that. Like, it could be that nap that day, and if I get that nap that day and I still don't have that answer, I'm going to sleep early that night because I know I'm going to get a spiritual hangover.
Wow.
Like, I can count on it, and I think that's where my relationship with my guides is so much stronger. Like, guides come in and like a shy girl, like, right? They don't want to talk because they can't interfere with your free will.
Yeah.
But when you start making that connection or that interest or that intention to make that connection, then that relationship gets stronger, and so you can start having a greater relationship with them. My best experience or best story is for all the Christians out there, Jesus Christ, right? At the end, they're like, the person's like, at the end of the day, Jesus, you weren't there. How come you weren't there? And he's like, you talk to me in the morning, then you forget about me the whole day, right? All you have to do is ask for me, and I think it's the same relationship with your guides. It's the same relationship with your partners. Yeah. If you don't talk to your girlfriend for like a week, she's going to have a problem with you. You know what I mean? It's like communication in third dimension and beyond. You got to have it. And I found that if I'm in the pain body, then I know that I am outside my body right now. I am not letting it flow. There's some level where I'm trying to control and force, and that's why it's not working. So I have to laugh. At that time, I'm not laughing.
Yeah.
But I have to laugh at the end, like, that's the reminder. And I'm supposed to know this. We're throwing a podcast about it. But, hey, even I go through that.
Yeah. So would you say you're the type that if, let's say you're watching a horror movie or whatever you're experiencing prior to going to sleep, do you carry that with you into your astral experience?
That's a really good question, and I think Abraham was right in this. Abraham was talking about this. One, I think horror movies are fantastic, and the reason why is because, for guys will know this, all the guys will know this from high school, right? You always want to take a girl to a horror movie because she's going to jump, and where's she going to jump? She's going to jump right into your lap and your arms, you know what I mean? But then, just the thrill of being scared. But for those that know and go back and watch it as you grow older, like Freddy Krueger and all that, those are very religious movies. the people that died was pride or excessiveness. They were all of these commandments that people were breaking. The person that lived at the end was the pure person, right? So when you look at it from that aspect, there's a lot of spirituality in those horror movies. But like my grandfather told me last night, we're getting caught in this third dimension where there are a lot of polarities that exist that we are drawn into. We're so drawn into the illusion, and everything's usually not what it appears to be. And so when you watch one of these goody-goody movies, just like watching a politician that's so against something, they're probably so against something because they are actually doing something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started learning the polarities and learning that things aren't what they appear, then I had a greater appreciation for horror movies because they are very spiritual, but it scares people on the surface because of maybe gore. And I'm not a big gore person either. I think there's different levels to horror movies. But if it's a spiritual thriller wrapped into as a horror movie, there's a lot of lessons. Just even Split. Like Split is sold as a horror movie. It's scary. These people get kidnapped. But when you delve into the spirituality of Pain Body, I mean, we wouldn't even be talking about this today if I had not seen that movie. But taking a step back and seeing the spirituality in it and the psychology behind it, you're just seeing the pain and the fear at first. But it's more of understanding how a person can actually have that psychic or psychotic break and how you can get that person back. A lot of people watch and you didn't watch it yet, so I can't talk about it. But I will say Get Out, right? It's a fear. There's a lot of fear in the movie. There's a lot of people talking about it. It's addressing a lot of issues about polarities again, right? Good versus evil, color, and this and that. But nobody talks about it, and I can tell you this part because they didn't even really address it afterwards. The guy was a smoker, and through hypnosis, he stopped smoking, right? Nobody's talking about that, right? So there's still some underlying themes even in that movie if you look beyond just what's in your face about the fear and separation, that there's a lot of spirituality in it. So I love that as well.
Yeah, I know quite a number of people that can't watch horror movies right before going to bed because they'll have nightmares.
Yeah.
I've never been like that. They've never fazed me.
Well, you said that. You said that too, and I didn't directly answer it because I went off on the tangent. But Abraham said that too. Abraham's like, well, with humans, you guys, especially now, we have so much distraction. We don't spend time on anything.
Yeah.
Right. So if it was the 80s, and this happened, I remember Dungeons and Dragons as a child. We used to play. But people were killing themselves over that movie, over that TV show and the game. They took that game off the shelf, right? So at that time in the 80s, there weren't we didn't have the distractions we have today. So there was more time to think about these things and more time to go off on a tangent, right?
Yeah.
And so with watching a movie like that before bed, I agree. I'd rather watch it during the day because then I'm going to get distracted and go on to something else. I might watch sports or go out on a date or something, and now I have my mind focused on all these other things. Whereas I think it's true that you usually process when you go to sleep a lot of what's on your mind right before you go to bed.
Yeah.
And so I also like doing this, and I didn't even plan on doing it, so this is a good setup, is gratitude. I think the power of gratitude is so huge, and I think it's the biggest and the smallest of things. I think even the smaller things and girls are probably like that too, because guys like only remembering the big gifts that we've given her. We get in the arguments of, you didn't send me flowers today, or something really small, and you're like, but I bought you a car, and she's like, it's not the same.
That's the same.
And so, but when you look at gratitude and you appreciate, hey, I got up today, I can use all of my bodily functions. There's people in the world across town maybe that cannot do that. Yeah. And I try to count at least, at first it was 5, and 5 was hard, and then 10, and 10 was hard, and then 20, so I'm around 20, and I try to think about at least 20 things that I was grateful of, something that has happened in that day, and it's also helped me to sleep too. I'm always asleep right beforehand. So I've raised my vibration, I feel, and then that way on astral, I can have better dreams because of it, and I can retain more because of it, because of the gratitude. So I think that keeps me out of the pain body as well, is having that gratitude. And everybody that I know that are really successful in life, no matter how you look at it, both spiritually and both in material form, they both have a high level of gratitude.
Wow, okay. Yeah, gratitude is important. I know Oprah Winfrey's a big proponent of gratitude, keeps a gratitude journal. I know you keep one too.
Absolutely.
I keep one. And if you don't have a gratitude journal, get one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's probably a good way to close it. Okay. Because, you know, we came in, we're talking about pain body, and we didn't really go down to the deep depths of how bad it could be. And I think some people may want that because we're attracted to low energy, right? I love sports too. I love football and all that, and gladiators in generations before that. We kind of love that blood sport, right? We're focused on if there's an accident, we're rubbernecking to see if there's any type of carnage or what have you, right? Yeah. And so I wanted to look at pain body from a homie's perspective, just give you a different perspective of addressing the pain body instead of going deep down into the depths of how bad a pain body could be. Yeah. We wanted to not only acknowledge it, but we also wanted to acknowledge how to deal with it. Yep. Would you agree? Yep. Awesome. Wholeheartedly. So there you go, guys. It's pain body. Thanks for those that stayed all the way to the end. And we look forward to giving you some more content as it moves forward. The site is up now, so definitely check out intrinsicmotivation.life. And you can get access to all of our other videos and articles and different podcasts. It's all there for you. Intrinsicmotivation.life. So definitely check that out, and we'll keep it coming for you weekly. So with that, I am Hamza.
I'm David.
And we look forward to seeing you on the next wrap.
Peace out.
Peace.